Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 17th of September, 2025. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Charles Mallet, and I'm joined in the studio today by Mike Robinson. Welcome to the programme, Mike.
Thank you, Charles.
We have Vanessa Beeley joining via live link from Lebanon and Sandy Adams also on live link from Somerset. Now, in today's programme, we're going to be looking at the latest situation in Gaza as it continues to deteriorate, unfortunately. We are going to explore the World Social Summit in Doha, as well as a closer look at at least what's happening concerning investigatory powers in the United Kingdom, as well as recent developments on the war narrative. Vanessa's going to be looking at some actions being taken for the benefit of the people of Palestine, or at least so it would be hoped. And then we're going to look at latest in the absurdity of the carbon capture scheme, as well as the further deployment of AI by the NHS. But we're going to start with the inward state visit of Donald Trump and indeed what he may have brought with him to the UK. So we're going to go to Mike to consider what might be about to happen.
Well, indeed. So, yes, Donald Trump has arrived in the UK for the second state visit. This is the first time any world leader has been invited for a second state visit, which appeals to Trump's ego, as we can hear now.
Well, my relationship is very good with the UK, and Charles, as you know, who's now king, is my friend. And it's the first time this has ever happened where somebody was honored twice, so it's a great honor. And this one's at Windsor. They've never used Windsor Castle for this before. They used Buckingham Palace. And I don't want to say one's better than the other, but they say Windsor Castle is the ultimate, right? So it's going to be nice. But basically, I'm there also on trade. They want to see if they can refine the trade deal a little bit. We made a deal, and it's a great deal. And I'm into helping them. Our country is doing very well. We've never done this well. We're having trillions of dollars coming because of the tariffs. They'd like to see if they could get a little bit better deal, so we'll talk to them. But primarily it's to be with Prince Charles and Camilla. They're friends of mine for a long time, long before he was king. And it's an honor to have him as king. And, you know, I think he represents the country so well. I've watched. He's such an elegant gentleman, and he represents the country so well.
Brilliant, eh?
Someone's been misinforming him if he thinks it's the first state visit to Windsor Castle. That's absolutely not the case. But if it makes him feel better, then there we are.
Well, anyway, on the trade deal, which he mentioned in passing there, the Starmer regime has announced the first ever UK-US tech agreement, which will, quote, bring new healthcare breakthroughs, clean homegrown energy, and more investment into the local communities and businesses in Britain and the United States. Now, Sandy's going to be talking more about AI and the NHS later, but this comes as America's top technology and AI firms, and I say that dripping with sarcasm, like Microsoft, NVIDIA, Google, OpenAI and CoreWeave commit to a combined £31 billion to boost the UK's AI infrastructure and cutting-edge tech, says the government. From data centres to computer chips, the processing power behind AI, today's commitments, they say, builds on the £44 billion investment in the UK's AI tech sector under this government. That's their words. Now, on screen, you see the statement from OpenAI with the lovely graphic there. Now, according to them, this will help power the UK's future economy, boost its global competitiveness, and deliver on the country's National AI Opportunities Action Plan. And they say that boosting the UK's status as an AI maker, NVIDIA will join forces with companies across the UK to deploy 120,000 advanced GPUs, that's graphics processing units, across the UK, representing its biggest ever rollout in Europe to date. And they say that this infrastructure is the building block of AI technology, able to carry out a huge number of calculations in a split second. So we should all be highly impressed by that. Again, the questions need to be asked. Where's the energy going to come from? Where's the cooling water going to come from? Well, under this partnership, let's just bring this on screen, because the UK and the United States will put joint resources and expertise into making emerging technologies a shared success for the British and American people, apparently. So millions of patients could receive life-saving treatment faster. More on that later. And they say that families could get access to cleaner, more reliable energy thanks to a civil nuclear deal. Maybe, perhaps, but perhaps not. They say that local communities and businesses will see greater opportunities through rollout of AI infrastructure, creating jobs and driving growth. Now, one of the companies that's behind all this is this one, Nscale. Now, this is apparently a British company based in London, but it seems to be delivering GPUs to the Middle East and North Africa is one of its main areas of sort of interest, and I'm not sure whether that includes Israel or not. I haven't seen any particular evidence for that, but that's just by the way. But they are also involved in producing this, which is OpenAI to build its first European data center in Norway with partners, and this is also being called Stargate. So Stargate. Stargate Norway, sorry. So it seems to be a process that's being rolled out just about everywhere, Charles, at the moment. So my question is, what is the destination for this? So let's try to imagine our future here a little bit. So robotics and AI will provide the labor and the production, and that's mainly because, of course, our demographics are falling. We're not producing any babies anymore, so we're going to have to fill that gap with robotics and AI, and therefore us humans will be reduced to consumption machines. Now, how are we going to earn a living? Well, we're not, because we're going to live off universal basic income, and digital ID and CBDC is going to be required. So there we go. That is pretty much, I believe, where we are going to end up if we continue down this path.
Yeah, and I think it seems likely we will. I think that's a prediction that people should absolutely bear in mind. And, you talk about AI opportunities. It's very hard to see how they are opportunities for anyone other than the companies that are rolling this stuff out and hoovering up enormous amounts of taxpayer money. Now, on a related note, we're going to go to Sandy. Now, Doha, of course, has been in the news for various reasons recently, but you're going to be talking about something else, the Social Summit.
Yes, the Social Summit. It's the World Social Summit by obviously it's the United Nations and the World Economic Forum are getting together, and it's the second summit for social development. And that the first one was held in Copenhagen in 1993, the year after the Earth Summit. So they haven't had one of these. Summit for Social Development for a long, long time. So it's quite an interesting point. We have got a video to explain what it's about.
In 1995, history was made. The World Summit for Social Development in Copenhagen united world leaders around a groundbreaking commitment to put people at the centre of development. They pledged to eradicate poverty, promote social integration, and achieve full and productive employment for all. Over the years, this commitment transformed into action. The Millennium Development Goals set a global agenda for poverty eradication, health, and education. The Sustainable Development Goals envisioned a just and sustainable world. The Pact for the Future reaffirmed global solidarity for current and future generations. In 3 decades, progress has been remarkable. Extreme poverty has been reduced by half. Digital transformation has revolutionized access to services, empowering millions and fostering inclusion. More children, especially girls, are in school. Breakthroughs in global health have increased life expectancy and tackled diseases like HIV/AIDS. But challenges remain. Inequalities in income, education, health, and opportunity persist. A digital divide excludes millions. People living in vulnerable situations such as older persons, indigenous peoples, and persons with disabilities face barriers. As we approach the second World Summit for Social Development in 2025, the world must renew its commitment to inclusive social development. Together we can achieve equal opportunities for all, resilient and sustainable societies, a truly inclusive world where everyone is included. This will bring our journey onwards towards the second World Summit for Social Development in Qatar. Let's work together for inclusion, equality, and people.
Thank you. That film you saw there was 10 years before the Sustainable Development Goals were announced in 2015, but they were exactly the same. And obviously in 2000 we had the Millennium Development Goals. They failed. They were supposed to be tackling poverty, health, and education. In 2015, obviously, they launched the goals, the 17 goals, which laid out a roadmap for a more sustainable and, well, they say a more sustainable and equitable future. It's actually the roadmap for the fourth industrial revolution. And in 2021, our common agenda called for renewed inclusive multilateralism. And in 2024, the Pact of the Future reaffirmed solidarity across generations. So that first summit was pretty much, the same as we've got now, but kind of, just rehashed. So they say that the challenges still remain, and so the road to Doha is really a roadmap, really for the future. And what they're doing is they're looking at a progression of the Sustainable Development Goals. 30 years on, you've still got the same challenges. It hasn't changed, because 30 years on, we're still looking at the same development goals, and they are falling behind in these goals. You've got the 10 commitments that they said they would achieve, and those commitments have not been achieved. It's still work in progress. So what we can see from this is that the 2025 progress assessment reveals that the world remains far off track from achieving these goals. So I think we'll be looking at that a bit later. So at the moment, there's another one of these conferences going on, and it's a Sustainable Development Impact Meetings, which are pretty much this, it's all about human computation. It's about what we're going to be dealing with in the future, and how they think we're going to live. So the key themes: accelerating social progress, climate and nature with crossover into social justice and economic transitions, tackling inequality and promoting inclusive growth. And Deloitte, a part of this, Deloitte are saying they're committed to helping create better futures by making an impact that matters. That's why we're taking to the world stage across the United Nations General Assembly week, because it's actually the United Nations General Assembly as well. The Climate Week, which is actually next week. It's the 22nd to the 27th in New York City. So the World Economic Forum Sustainable Development Impact Meetings are to help build a sustainable, equitable, and prosperous future for all. During this week of thoughtful conversations and strategic action, we're convening some of the world's most powerful business leaders and policymakers to help build shared solutions that will make a lasting impact. So the key themes are accelerating social progress. We're looking at social contracts here. I mean, they beat around the bush. They're looking at impact investing. And Deloitte, as we know, are all bound up with impact investing. They're the ones that are working with the Royal Foundation, with Kate Middleton, looking at impact investing and data mining, the under fives. So this is what we're looking at, and they skirt around it. They don't actually say what they're doing. Climate and nature with crossover into social justice, all that stuff. So basically, we're looking at the people who attend are stakeholders from governments, policymakers, business and corporate leaders, civil society, NGOs. You've got young people's groups and financiers. They're all going to be there, just literally working out how they can extract as much data from us as they can. Now, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, they are failing. And I don't think they were ever meant to succeed, because they don't care whether they succeed or not, to be honest. All they want is to be able to get the human computation. So in 2025, the progress assessment reveals that the world remains far off track from achieving the 2030 goals. The 2015 baseline at the most recent years, supplemented by agency analysis. Among these, only 35% show adequate progress. Only 18% are on track, and 17% are making moderate progress. In contrast, 48% of targets show insufficient progress, including 31% with only marginal gains and 17% with no progress at all. So 18% of the targets have regressed below 2015 base levels. So it's not working anyway. But they still continue to have these conferences in big hotels and just push it and just tell us that they're working hard at saving the planet. So we're looking at these goals. End poverty. Poverty is actually worse. If you look at the graphs, poverty is declining. And the thing is that digital poverty, they've invented new poverty, digital poverty, fuel poverty. I can't even afford to boil the kettle poverty. So there's zero hunger. That's not going well. We've got more food banks, and in this country, we've got the Trussell Trust saying that there's more food banks being used by the UK's people. Good health, that's declining. Global health management, most of us can't get a doctor's appointment even. So quality education, dumbing down. Nobody's learning anything. So they're not achieving their goals in schools, and peace and justice is not working either because we've got the more corruption. So there we have it. That it's not working, but they aren't interested in achieving the goals, I don't think. Thank you.
Sandy, thank you very much indeed. Now, on to something different. Yesterday, the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, the IPCO, announced that it had been directed by the Prime Minister to investigate a series of apparent abuses of the judicial system, most notably by the security service MI5. Now, the popular narrative, as delivered by the BBC, is inextricably linked with this case. And the story goes back some years concerning the serious abuse of a woman by a man who was alleged to be being used by MI5 as a covert human intelligence source. And three of the many issues are whether such abuse did actually take place, and therefore whether MI5 failed by extension to protect this woman, whether MI5 lied to the courts about their relationship with the man in question, referred to as Agent X, and indeed whether the security service lied to the BBC. Now, it's notable in this BBC article that that they are able to talk to MI5 about this in the first place. Of course, UK Column, I dare say, would not have the same success were we to try. This is written by Daniel de Simone, and he writes that, in fact, MI5 had disclosed the man's status in phone calls to me as it tried to persuade me not to investigate the man, known publicly only as Agent X. So the BBC really appear to be more concerned about the lies told to them rather than the other particulars, which, of course, bearing in mind truthfulness, is somewhat ironic, one might consider. Now, at the heart of this is the policy of the intelligence services to neither confirm nor deny whether or not a particular situation is the case. And I think one must ask really whether this sort of situation should be surprising when one considers the many pieces of legislation which are enabling covert and secret activity to be taken, indeed including criminal activity. We've got the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, the Investigatory Powers Act 2016, the Investigatory Powers Amendment Act 2024, and of course the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Act 2021 as well. They are, of course, always cloaked in the suggestion that they are necessary for your safety, and of course that they're being managed and regulated appropriately and responsibly. Now, there is a reminder, or at least I'm going to issue a reminder from the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Act 2021 that a criminal conduct authorization is an authorization for criminal conduct in the course of or otherwise in connection with the conduct of a covert human intelligence source. And I know Mike has done so recently, but I'm going to read the full list of agencies which may break the law with impunity, subject to satisfying the conditions. And they are, as written down in the legislation, any police force, the National Crime Agency, the Serious Fraud Office, the Intelligence Services, the Armed Forces, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, the Department of Health and Social Care, the Home Office, the Ministry of Justice, the Competition and Markets Authority, the Environment Agency, the Financial Conduct Authority, the Food Standards Agency, the Gambling Commission. So it is quite staggering, really, that those privileges, one might call them, are afforded to all of those organisations. And the Prime Minister's intervention in this particular situation may be regarded as superfluous in that it adds nothing to what the courts had said in both the beginning and end of July of this year, which was that further investigation is required, and this is to be done by the IPC, as I mentioned. Now, the overall investigation is held by the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, and on the 30th of July, over 3 years after proceedings began, wrote that Beth, the claimant here, the respondent, sorry, wrong claimant, Beth was in a relationship with X for a number of years and claims that he was seriously abusive to her. Beth says that X was a covert human intelligence source who was working for MI5. The tribunal has not yet considered or determined the substantive merits of the claim. So the point here appears to be that it's all being made to look like there's going to be increased regulation of agencies like MI5, whilst at the same time paving the way for enhanced surveillance of the population under the banner, again, of security. And I'd just like to point out that Brian Gerrish wrote about exactly this a decade ago on the UK Column website, and I quote, "Today, Britain is the most spied upon country in the world, with millions of CCTV cameras and increasingly sophisticated facial tracking and recognition software." And of course, there'll be a link to that in the show notes. And the last thing I'd like to point out is that the Investigatory Powers Commissioner is, of course, none other than Brian Leveson, the man who ran the inquiry which set the ball rolling for the situation that Brian Gerrish has just described, or at least described a decade ago. And most recently, the same man whose report on the judiciary said, among other things, that juries should be done away with because they are too time-consuming. Now, that moves us on to Vanessa, and Vanessa, to go some way to describing what's been happening recently in Gaza.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Charles, things have deteriorated beyond what we thought was where it couldn't deteriorate any further previously. This short video that I'll show just to begin my report, hundreds of thousands of people are being forced out of Gaza City, which is in central Gaza, into areas in the south that are effectively becoming kill pens for the Zionists. This was the bombing of a truck that was evacuating a whole family. I apologize for the distressing video.
الأطفال يلا 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 شهداء يلا شهداء امرأة وأطفال نازحين ناس نازحين يلا يلا نازحين يلا الشهداء.
So while an entire family was wiped out in that one bombing, and while many others are being slaughtered on their way to try and evacuate to where there is effectively no safety at all in Gaza. This is Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who, if you remember, said that Israel was doing our dirty work, meaning the EU, when they attacked Iran. Here he is speaking with great emotion at the reopening of a synagogue in Munich.
Einfach nicht hätte passieren dürfen unter uns Menschen. Liebe Frau Salamander, Sie sind aufgewachsen als Tochter von Überlebenden der Shoah in einem, Sie haben es gerade in Ihrer Rede schon gesagt, Displaced Persons Camp bei München. Und Sie haben in einem Ihrer Bücher geschrieben, dass Sie als Kind immer wieder diese eine Frage stellten, ob denn den Juden niemand geholfen habe.
He goes on to say that the government will wage war against anti-Semitism, which means against protesters against the genocide that Zionists are committing in Gaza and in the occupied territories. At the same time, around 2 days ago, this report appeared in Dutch media, De Volkskrant. This is the English version. What the wounds are telling us, it's a very good investigative report into the deliberate sniping by the IOF and drone snipers of children. So let's just have a look at one child, Mira, aged 4, was shot in the head. There are multiple reports of this kind of killing in the Volkskrant article, and I recommend that everybody reads it in full. Basically, the findings of the article were that 114 children were found with similar wounds, with bullets in various areas of their body that eventually killed them. Eyewitnesses told the doctors that the bullets came from the IOF snipers or drones. According to the former commander of Dutch land forces, the chance that these were accidental hits is negligible, since the doctors describe more than 100 cases. 9 doctors testified that the wounds had probably been caused by the controversial fragmentation weapons, which I'll come on to in the next slide. And of course, the IOF is denying everything, despite there being a history of Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch reports on the use of fragmentation weapons and sniping of children. And if we look, this is the effect of one of the fragmentation weapons. So when the bullet or the missile explodes, it releases hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny pellets of tungsten, which enter the body. Sometimes the children are sent home because the wound is not immediately visible, and yet those tiny pellets enter the organs. And it turns out that they've been struck by fragments of metal shaped like cubes or cylinders. These pieces are so small, just a few millimeters, that doctors sometimes can't even find an entry or exit wound. But inside the body, they cause what doctors describe as horrific damage. Organs are pierced, nerves and blood vessels are hit. As a result, patients suffer fatal internal bleeding or are forced to undergo amputation. This is another child from the article. This is according to Dr. Perlmutter. The fragments are made of tungsten. The girl was hit by the metal fragments. Unfortunately, they entered through her nasal cavity and into her brain and killed her. Now, today we also have to remember 17th of September is the 1 year after the terrorist pager attack in Lebanon. This is just one of the victims. This is Hussein Daini, age 12. I used to run and go to school. Now I just go to Beirut for treatment. More than 3,000 people in Lebanon were injured by the pager attack. Many mutilated, lost their eyes, their hands, had their faces laced with scars that will haunt them for the rest of their life. And I wanted to basically finish with this video from 2 of the NHS doctors in the UK that are being persecuted by the Zionist movement in the UK through the NHS itself, through the bodies that govern the NHS. One is Dr. Rihanna Ali, and the other is Dr. Rahma Al-Adwana, who, of course, I've spoken about previously on UK Column. But just to play what Dr. Rihanna had to say about what Israel is doing to the Palestinians.
Sure. The settlers have done that since. They have poisoned crops. They have booby-trapped, they have poisoned, left poisoned food, tinned food. They've booby-trapped toys. They have used quadcopters, which emit the sound of children crying, to lure Palestinians out. And then as soon as they come out to look for the crying child, they kill them. Okay? So I think I'm perfectly correct to say that Israelis are almost a different breed. Okay? That nowhere else, I believe, on this planet will you find a society that is so psychopathic, okay? And just because you find a few exceptions, there is something wrong with Israeli society. And I think the poll after poll supports my view. 82% of Israeli Jews, that's a poll from only a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, showing that 82% of Israeli Jews supported the ethnic cleansing of Gaza.
And another reminder that September the 16th to the 18th, of course, is commemoration of the 1982 Sabra and Shatila massacre of Palestinians, where Zionists engineered the massacre, the rape and the slaughter of Palestinian men, women and children in 1982 here in Lebanon.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Very challenging material. And of course, we do apologise to some degree for using such distressing images, although it is critically important that people are made aware, especially whilst governments stand idly by. Now, the UK column, as you may know, is funded only by its members and indeed by donations. And if you would like to be a part of that and sustaining what it is that we do, we would be very, very pleased. And on our front page, there is a big button saying click here, which will articulate the ways in which you can support what we do. I'd also like to remind you that our shop has a range of goodies to be sported at almost all occasions. So please do take a look there. Now, going out on the Germ Warfare podcast tonight is a rerun. Germ is away at the minute, but we're going to listen again to Lara Logan and about what happened to journalism. So please tune in at 7 o'clock. And then tomorrow, going out at 1 o'clock, will be a talk that Mike and I gave at the Hope Freedom event back over the August bank holiday. Entitled The Editor's Law Comes to Britain, but really dealing with a number of points of legislation that have come out or are coming in recent years. So please do tune into that tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Now, coming up on the 28th of September, if you happen to be north or in Scotland or prepared to travel, then there's an event being organised by Common Knowledge Edinburgh on Sunday, 28th September. I will be speaking at it and Diane will also be present. So please do get along to that and support it if you can. And then to our UK column on location event in York on Saturday, the 18th of October. We're pleased to announce that it is sold out, but a reminder that the live stream is very much available for tickets, and also to make it very clear that if you do buy a ticket for the live stream, you will also have access to Andy Wakefield's excellent film Protocol 7. So please, if you can, join us on the live stream. You don't need to watch it on the day. You will have access to it thereafter. And a reminder to anyone who has an in-person ticket, you will also have access to the live stream. So I hope that's clear and that we'll get lots of people signing up for that, because it will be a great day. Now, we're going to go to a narrative that we've treated with a great deal of detail over the years and months, and it's war and how it's building.
Yes, indeed. So on Monday, NATO announced that on Saturday at the weekend, a French Rafale fighter jet was scrambled, one of 3 deployed to Poland in response to, quote, another potential threat from Russian drones. The response, they say, was fast and the alert was over quickly. So that was according to Supreme Allied Commander Europe. Now, 4 German Eurofighters apparently stand ready to respond at an airbase in the northeast of Poland, and 3 helicopters from the Czech Republic arrived in Poland over the weekend, and that's according to this NATO release. But we, of course, heard in the last few days that the UK, Denmark, Spain, Sweden and Italy have all said they'll provide capabilities for the NATO operation in Poland as well. The Starmer regime said that, quote, the Typhoons will operate out of RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire and are expected to start flying missions over Poland in the coming days. They'll be supported by RAF Voyager air-to-air refueling aircraft from RAF Bryce Norton. The commitment follows a meeting of the North Atlantic Council on Wednesday, the 10th of September, where the UK and allies discussed the situation following Poland's request for consultations under Article 4 of the Washington Treaty. Allies expressed full solidarity with Poland. So this is apparently, they go on to say, in fact, this new era of threat exemplified by Russia's intensifying airspace violations requires a new era of defense. and this government is delivering the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. The rhetoric is nonsense, but at the point here is that they continue to try to build this narrative of Russian attacks on NATO countries with a view, well, Article 4 already invoked, but with a view to invoking Article 5. So where does that take us? Well, in the meantime, the UK Foreign Office summoned the Russian ambassador to the UK, Andrei Klein, yesterday to complain about alleged Russian drones violating Polish airspace. And TASS here is reporting that, quotes, on September the 15th, the ambassador was invited to the Foreign Office where a formal protest was lodged against him regarding the presence of drones in Polish airspace. The British were asked if they had any evidence that the drones had been launched by the Russian military. They did not provide any. We also asked them to clarify the motives for sending drones towards Poland. Obviously, Russia would not have been interested in this. On the contrary, the Kiev leadership has many reasons and opportunities to carry out such a false flag operation. It's not difficult to list them. No counter arguments have been presented to us. And the embassy, Klein went on to say, we reiterate that Russia has no interest in escalating tensions in relations with Poland or NATO. On the contrary, Kiev and its sponsors who've repeatedly carried out provocations for this purpose are interested in further inflating militaristic anti-Russian hysteria. Therefore, it's clear who's at fault. Well, the narrative for Article 5 continues to build. Reuters here claims that the Romanian Defence Ministry has said that it scrambled an F-16 to chase a Russian drone that it claimed entered Romanian airspace from Ukraine. The Defence Minister said the F-16 pilots came close to taking down the drone as it was flying very low before it left national airspace towards Ukraine. It flew back towards Ukraine. Charles, I don't know what to say about that. Did it come from Russia? Therefore, it's impossible to say. The problem is, of course, that the whole Russian drones in Poland fakery continues to fall apart. With the news that the house that was damaged was actually damaged by a Polish missile fired from an F-16. And actually, according to Polish sources, not mentioned in this article, but those sources saying that the house had already been damaged by a storm. But let's not let any of that get in the way of the truth that the government wants us to believe. Now, things are not going so well for NATO here in Europe. Let's see what we've got. Sorry, things may not be going so well here for NATO in Europe, but they can at least point to their continuing expansion in the Pacific as the encirclement of Russia and the increasing pressure on China continues. So here's Defense Times reporting that the U.S. Army put on a display of its Typhoon mid-range missile system in Japan a couple of days ago. Typhoon was featured during the annual bilateral exercise Resolute Dragon, which started last week. And that includes more than 19,000 US and Japanese troops participating in an exercise on maritime defense and littoral protection, which is held across Japan. And that's according to the US Department of Defense, cited by Defense News here. At the same time, Japan's Air Force is sending a contingent of 4 F-15J fighters and support aircraft on a tour of the US and Europe, quotes, to strengthen cooperation with NATO amid threats from Russia, China, and North Korea. And that's according to Newsweek on screen at the moment. Japan views the security of the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific as indivisible, citing Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, China's attempts to change the status quo by force in disputed Asian waters, and North Korea's development of nuclear missiles. The deployment of the Japanese Air Force, Newsweek reports, its first mission in Europe and Canada follows the conclusion of a British aircraft carrier's operations in Northeast Asia. So the war machine continues to build. But just to finish this off, in response to reports of a US Navy vessel boarding and detaining a Venezuelan fishing boat, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs denounced the risk of conflict and the raising of the risk in conflict. And they said recently, in the name of combating drug trafficking, the US has deployed forces to the waters of the Caribbean Sea off Venezuela and claimed to have sunk a Venezuelan vessel, shot dead soldiers, and intercepted and detained a Venezuelan fishing boat, resulting in continued tensions in the region. The US's moves threaten regional peace and security. severely infringe upon other countries' sovereignty, security, and lawful rights and interests, and seriously violate international law. And that was according to the Chinese Foreign Ministry. I just wanted very briefly, Vanessa, just to get a comment from you on this, because you are aware of what's going on with Venezuela. So if you could comment on that, and also the Chinese statement here.
Well, I think, historically, the war on drugs has never been anything more than the US basically benefiting from the drug cartels, but then weaponizing them against the target countries. We've seen it in Venezuela, and of course, we saw it in Syria with President Assad being called the head of the narco state with the Captagon claims. Of course, Captagon running is still continuing since the former government fell, which suggests that it had nothing to do with President Assad, but more to do with the Western terrorist proxies.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. Now let's move on then back to sort of Palestinian-related issues.
Yeah, indeed. With Vanessa, I mean, you obviously, your earlier segment really describing how little is being done by the political class who continue to sit on their hands. But now you're going to tell us a bit more about people who are, in fact, getting out and doing something.
Well, sadly, the report is actually more about the infiltration of pro-Palestine movements, particularly in the West, and this is related very much to the UK. It's an investigation that was largely done by Professor David Miller, but I participated in it at Palestine Declassified with Chris Williamson and David Miller. So this is a concert that's actually coming up on the 17th of September, Together for Palestine. There's a huge array of musicians and artists, very well-known ones, that are performing, as they believe, to raise funds for Palestine. But the reality is, if we look at the background to the organizations that are effectively organizing this event, so if we look at, first of all, Choose Love, this is just one organization that I'm going to focus on today. And here is David talking about it on the Palestine Declassified report that we did.
Zionist foundations called the Jewish Philanthropies and others, and including also some British Zionist foundations who have been giving them money. And also in there is the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which of course is a well-known, it says in the film there, a CIA pass-through. Now what that means, of course, is that in previous decades, that what would happen is that the Rockefeller Brothers and the Ford Foundation and other big foundations would take money from the CIA and would pass it on to other organizations. So it would disguise the role of the CIA in pushing money out to what were effectively CIA assets. Now that appears to be what's happening with Choose Love, and there are a whole range of other organizations which are funding it, which indicates that there are questions to be asked about its activities. It's not just about helping refugees or relieving suffering in earthquake regions or after disasters. It's also about, it looks like, pursuing the interests of powerful actors, including in the national security state in the US and perhaps even elsewhere.
In fact, Choose Love has multiple funders that are related to the Zionist movement in the UK and the US. And in fact, Choose Love celebrated the fall of Syria, supported the fall of Syria and the rise of Al-Qaeda to power in Syria. In fact, they gave $500,000 to the CIA MI6 incubated White Helmet organization that we've written about and covered many times on UK Column, to investigate the alleged crimes committed at Sednaya prison. Even the White Helmets now have walked back many of the claims that they made back in December 2024. So Choose Love is clearly has a bias towards supporting Israel. It doesn't allow any support, for example, of the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanction movement. And then let's have a look at Together for Palestine, the actual organization that was established in May 2025 and is now running this event, again, as I said, ostensibly for Palestine. But let's have a look at the directors of this organization, Anna Catherine Nolan and James Sardry. both of them co-directors and co-founders of the Syria campaign. What was the Syria campaign? Syria campaign was the main PR arm or auxiliary of the White Helmet that promoted regime change in Syria, claiming to be a human rights advocacy group, but in fact, criminalizing the Syrian government. And of course, the White Helmets ran the propaganda reference chemical weapons that were used to basically, in the end, criminalize the Syrian government and allies. And all of these organizations that formed a huge regime change complex, effectively established and run by the intelligence agencies in the countries invested in regime change in Syria, and that includes the UK. And finally, there will be a link in the show notes to a new article by David Miller that goes into far greater depth of infiltration, a cardinal function of the Zionist movement. But what is worrying is the extent to which the Zionist movement has, as we've said before, infiltrated special interest groups, NGOs, soft power within the UK itself, and is now behind the scenes of many of what appear to be pro-Palestine organizations.
I'm just going to mention before we move on, Charles, David Miller's also published articles on this issue at the UK column as well. So do have a look on the UK column website as well as Smith Press.
Yeah, absolutely. Vanessa, thank you very much indeed. On to the subject of carbon capture. Now, it may have escaped your attention that at the beginning of the month, there was a summit in London at the Carbon Capture Global Summit. And the language is important. They say that they're turbocharging carbon capture and underground storage and forging global partnerships. And that seems to be very much what it is about. Here we see that one of the main sponsors is none other than Shell. They claim that they're going to be increasing the amount of carbon captured by over 100 times the current figure by 2050. And to achieve this ambitious goal, they have to have a unified global effort. They transcend borders and the entire low-carbon supply chain and other such language. Now, this does appear to be all about appearance. The website is full of sort of lofty aims and promises and all the rest of it. And had you wanted to attend, you could have done so for the meagre sum of £3,440, and the gala dinner would have been an additional £400, but you would have seen the awards ceremony. Now, looking at the current government, the Labour manifesto from last year spoke about a 1 billion commitment to accelerate the deployment of carbon capture, words that might suggest there is something going on at the minute. So the question is, from what point are we starting? Now, I submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero to make a few inquiries, not just about progress, but also about cost. They replied, certainly on the cost side of things, by saying the UK government has committed 21.7 billion to CCUS over the next 25 years. And to date, they have spent £630 million on the programme. Now, that's interesting because also the UK's CCUS facilities have not yet stored any carbon dioxide. Now, that is staggering in its own right, I would say. But just to set it in context, I was just looking around various sort of government pledges this morning, and I see that the Ministry of Defence is crowing about a £250 million fund to boost local economies over 5 years. And yet here we are, not even putting carbon dioxide in the ground for 630 million. So that's just a sense of perspective. Now, also to qualify what it is we're talking about, we're going to look back to 2016, the Oil and Gas Authority, which presented their enhanced oil recovery strategy, an examination of methods of recovering crude oil. And one such was to use carbon dioxide, which becomes available from carbon capture and storage. And if that's confused you, then I should point out that this is actually the case. It was a technology proposed for reducing carbon dioxide, being suggested as a means for extracting so-called fossil fuels. So you might not be able to make it up, but the government did. I asked the department, as I referred to earlier in the FOI request, I asked how much carbon dioxide had been used for enhanced oil recovery, and was told that EOR is oil production and would not qualify. So they can't quite seem to make their minds up, but they can go on to say that the terms and conditions carrying out EOR would be in breach of the license. So one of many inconsistencies, some of which are covered by the fairly comprehensive and very damning report by the Public Accounts Committee. Now, it quotes the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero as saying that CCUS is essential for the UK to meet its net zero targets. Those are the words of the department, not the Public Accounts Committee. They do go on to say of the £22 billion commitment that a quarter of this financial support will come from the Exchequer, but 3/4 will come from levies on consumers who are already facing some of the highest energy bills in the world. And I think that's a very important point to make. Now, there's also every suggestion that none of this would ever be commissioned at all, because the storage permit will only be issued when the North Sea Transition Authority are confident that there will be no significant risk of leakage of CO2 or of harm to the environment and human health from the CO2 storage activity. Now, there's nothing in the track record of this type of technology to suggest that this is actually going to satisfy those conditions, and I have reported about this particular issue on UK Column previously. It's also stipulated that contractors, such as they may be, will only be appointed if they are able to meet the required standards. So effectively, it's as though the threshold of safety, at least, may never ever be met, despite the spending or committed spend of £22 billion. Now, the Public Accounts Committee is unable to point towards any evidence of any success anywhere, and indeed cites Norway as an example of a place that has taken far, far more time to try to store any kind of carbon dioxide than they had projected. And then also on the specific subject of leakage, I quote, recent scientific evidence suggests that producing liquid natural gas, brackets, which will be used to run several CCUS projects, such as Net Zero Teesside, close brackets, leaks more methane, a potent greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere than previously thought. So yes, the idea, again, is to store carbon dioxide whilst using liquid natural gas at the same time. This is how it's planned, and apparently we are not meant to consider the irony of any of it. Now, on the specific subject of levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide, I also asked the department about this, and they pointed me towards the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which monitors these levels and other atmospheric gases. Now, the most recent chart shown on screen here shows an upward trend of the carbon dioxide by parts per million. Now, this is going back to 1975, and the detail is hard to see. So I'll just fast forward to the last 5 years. And if you can see the screen, you'll note that it's very, very obvious that worldwide levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide follow a distinct pattern repeated year on year. So at exactly the same times of year, the carbon dioxide levels fall sharply for a couple of months and then rise sharply. And therefore, from this data, it's not even remotely conceivable that this is due to anthropogenic or human-induced factors, which of course should make this data an enormous nail in the coffin of so-called climate science. Now, the NOAA data shows, therefore, that the atmosphere is actually able to regulate itself. And if it were not for the upward trend, there could be no possible grounds for suggesting that the activities of mankind have anything to do with it at all. So carbon capture, in its latest sort of iteration, would appear to be dead in the water, which, even though it's likely to waste a huge amount of taxpayer money, may serve as further evidence to those caught up in climate alarmism that it is in fact a scam. Now, from here, we are going to go to, my apologies, to Sandy. And we were talking, I mentioned earlier that the National Health Service is joining in the action with regard to AI and it being the sort of epicenter of everything. So, Sandy, please tell us what you've got on that.
Yes, I mean, our healthcare is going to change quite dramatically, and all the more reason to move into alternative ways of doing things, because the data harvesting and data mining is obviously what's driving it all. So the Health Secretary and the Health and Social Care Secretary after COVID-19, announced that NHS X and NHS Digital will merge with NHS England and NHS Improvement. I mean, you may not have known all those existed. I mean, they weren't there before, but here they are. And this new technology is predictive, preventative, personalised and participatory medicine. So NHS at its core will be working around genetics in disease and possibly, reaching into the DNA of every man and woman in the UK. These apps monitor they team up with other data sources because all your data will be in one place, and it looks at every aspect of your life. It could be your shopping habits, your financial and social status, education, hereditary genomics, fitness, and more, feeding into that sort of corporate superstate. So according to NHSX, from 2020 to 2025, genomic medicine will be embedded into routine care. So let's just have a look at the future of health in this little video, please.
In the decades ahead, healthcare will undergo dramatic transformations. Medicine will become more precise. Value will shape care delivery. Patients will become empowered consumers. And digitalization will transform every facet of healthcare. Patients will have a digital twin, a customized computational model of themselves, enabling Dr. Clive to anticipate illness, guide therapy options, and predict outcomes of procedures. Expanding precision medicine will enable radiologists to make highly specific diagnoses for Stephen without unwarranted variations. AI-powered decision models, fed by vast population health data, will improve diagnostic accuracy. Healthcare will become anticipatory, organized around Paula's medical conditions, and available around the clock, transforming care delivery. Multidisciplinary, highly productive care teams structured around patients and their needs will collaboratively deliver the full cycle of care. All interactions with John will become convenient, personalized, and compassionate, improving patient experience. Supported by real-time monitoring and guidance, John will become more empowered and have physical and virtual access to care when and where he needs it. At Siemens Healthineers, we are enabling healthcare providers to increase value, shaping the future of healthcare.
Well, that all sounds very, very, very slick and wonderful, but we'll see, because in short, that some of these GP practices are bringing in a digital triage and workflow management system. These platforms they're buying in. I'm going to focus on one called Anima today, but there's other ones like Hero. And they're being rolled out across GP practices in the UK. Its function is to streamline how patient requests are received and prioritised and managed. In short, Anima functions as a central intake and triage system designed to replace or supplement traditional online consultation tools like the e-consult that they have now, and it will reduce staff workload. So I think we're seeing a way of getting rid of people by automating parts of the process. So Anima Health was founded in 2021 by Shanika Sharma, who's ex-McKinsey, and Sean Pang. And he's ex-Palantir. He's an ex-Palantir engineer. Palantir, obviously, is all wrapped up in US defense, and it's an AI company tied to the CIA, data analytics. So it's not just about helping GPs, it's about harvesting structured population health data. So anyway, it's got big backing by Silicon Valley. So we're looking at it, and in the terms of how this digital transformation and human computation, basically. So I'm looking at this as feeding into Agenda 2030, which is the third goal, which is good health and well-being. Basically, the UN wants universal centralized health data to monitor populations, digital ID, CBDCs, and this all feeds into what they call the equity of care, presented as reducing GP workload and improving access. But in reality, it's standardizing patient interaction into algorithms, depersonalizing care and tightening central control. So we really do need to make our parallel systems and focus on natural health care, because this to me is really kind of a bit too pervasive. Thank you.
Absolutely, Sandy, and of course something will come up at our York event in October. Vast population health data, I think something we'll probably be able to discuss a little bit further in extra, so thank you very much for that. Now, just a very quick bulletin on farming, really prompted by the results of a survey by the Country Land Business Association, which is a poll only admittedly of 500 farmers. And I should remind you that there are over 200,000 holdings in the UK. But of those 500, 80% have told the CLA that they don't think their business will survive for a further decade, while 60 have said they considered getting out of farming altogether. Now, this is said to be sort of in response to, most prominently, the Labour Party's proposal to reinstate inheritance tax on agricultural land. Also, politically speaking, they say that 36% of those polled indicated they'd vote Reform at a general election, whilst 38% Conservative and 0% for Labour. Now, what this is suggesting, and I think particularly in light of the campaign that's been mentioned on the UK column in recent weeks surrounding the sort of flags going up all over the country and what it is to be British and all that sort of thing, it's easy to see how this could become a battleground. And of course, big food and supermarkets have hijacked this to a large extent by putting Union flags on produce to suggest that by buying British, you are actually supporting farmers, which of course is not really the case, because the results are in fact only good for the corporations, not the environment, not the farmers, and really not you. Now, associated with this, or at least in terms of subsidy, the government putting out information on their future, farming for the future. And the jargon is staggeringly confusing, but they're talking about phasing out subsidies for land ownership and tenure and improving the financial offer. And they really go on to describe, or at least try to describe, their sustainable farming incentive and how it can work for you. And on their particular website, they're saying that their choice of actions that can reward and support sustainable food production and all the rest of it. And the paragraph below says, we are not currently accepting any new SFI applications. Of course, the government on the DEFRA blog talking about having committed over 5 billion over the next 2 years for sustainable farming and nature recovery, and that they would be encouraging farmers to get into as many environmental land management schemes as possible. Of course, not possible because the scheme's closed. And again, just for context, 5 billion would last 10 days were it in the hands of the National Health Service. So frankly, the sooner the people and the farming community appreciate that the way out of this mess is to cut both government and the corporate giants out, and this is by trading directly with one another, the better. More to come on that, and we're going to finish off with something that may or may not be scary.
Well, I think it's very scary. It is very, very scary, because here comes Stratus. Yes, Corona is back. We had the original and the best, then we got a new variant, and then we got the Brazilian even at one point. But now we have Stratus. And how do I know this? Well, because the Plymouth Herald has told me. Let's have a look. New COVID strain, symptoms that are easily missed as variant spreading fast, Charles, because it's so ineffective and so unlikely to cause any harm whatsoever that you won't even notice that you have it. So you better take one of those lateral flow tests to make sure, and then take 6 months off work if you do actually catch it. That's probably what you need to do.
And thank goodness for the Plymouth Herald, otherwise how would anyone ever know?
How would we know?
Frankly.
Yes.
Right, well, that brings us to the end of the programme almost. I would just like to remind you that we have Germ and Lara Logan at 7 o'clock this evening. Mike and I will be speaking at 1 o'clock tomorrow, recorded from the Hope event. And of course, we will be staying on for extra time in a few minutes. So if you're a member, please do join us for that. If you're not a member, please do consider it. And finally, don't forget that there are, frankly, unlimited tickets available for the live stream for our October event. So please do join us for what will be an incredible day. Now, many thanks to Mike for joining me in the studio and to Vanessa and Sandy for joining by live link. Thank you very much for watching. And if we don't see you at extra time, we will look forward to seeing you at 1 o'clock on Friday. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.